Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today because right now, literally as we speak, one of the most incredible high-stakes dramas in all of global sports is unfolding. We're talking about an institution worth billions, a massive global sporting empire, and its entire governance structure is facing an absolute earthquake today. Let's unpack the Real Madrid power paradox. Okay, let's dive right into this. To really grasp what's happening today, we've got to understand how Real Madrid operates fundamentally differently from almost any other sports giant out there. You know, typically, modern superclubs are publicly traded companies, or they're owned by massive private equity firms, billionaires, sometimes even entire sovereign states. But Real Madrid? It doesn't work like that at all. It's not a commercial entity in that sense. There are no shares on a stock exchange. It belongs entirely, 100% to its fans, the Socios.
Which brings us to Section 1, Owned by the Fans, the democratic illusion. This is a utopian ideal, really, and it stems all the way back to the club's founding principles in 1902. The idea was simple and, honestly, kind of romantic. No single tycoon, no foreign investor, no private equity firm can pull the strings behind the scenes. The club and its future, they belong collectively to the membership.
And that membership? It's massive. We are talking about roughly 100,000 card-carrying members. These socios pay their annual dues, they register with the club, and, under Spanish law, they hold the absolute ultimate authority over the institution. The president of Real Madrid? They just govern on the fans' behalf.
So the crucial thing to understand here is how this power is actually distributed. It's a strict system of one member, one vote, decided by secret ballot. Voting power is tied purely to your membership status, not your bank account. There's no such thing as a golden share here. A socio who's been faithfully paying their dues for 50 years has the exact same voting weight as a fan who joined just over a year ago. At its core, it's a pure civic democracy.
Section 2, the impossible election rules. Okay, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a prospective candidate for a second. Imagine you're a lifelong fan, a dedicated socio, and you want to govern this utopian democracy. You've got the ideas, the passion, and you want to run for president.
Which naturally leads us to ask, so can any fan run for president? I mean, if it's a true democracy owned by the people, theoretically, the answer has to be yes, right? Well, let me go ahead and drop the hammer on that anyone can run myth. Now, the reality of what it actually takes is pretty jaw-dropping. To stand as a candidate, you absolutely must secure an aval bancario, a personal bank guarantee from a Spanish bank, and it has to cover exactly 15% of the club's annual budget. Because Real Madrid is a colossal enterprise with a budget well over €1 billion, that means a challenger has to personally underwrite more than €150 million. And here's the kicker. It has to be backed by their own personal wealth, not just some promises from outside investors.
But honestly, that massive financial hurdle is just one piece of this grueling obstacle course. Let's walk through the rest of this brutal checklist. You don't just need the €150 million. You also need to have been a socio for a minimum of 20 continuous years. You can't just run by yourself either. You've got to present a full slate of proposed board members right from the start, and every single one of their signatures must be legally notarized. And the craziest part? The sitting president is the one who triggers the election. Once they make the official announcement, challengers have an extremely tight window, usually just around 10 days, to assemble this gigantic financial and legal package. Obviously, this forces challengers to scramble wildly while heavily advantaging the incumbent, who, just had 4 years to prepare.
Now, these incredibly strict rules weren't always in place. They were actually implemented during a highly debated statute change back in 2012. On one side, supporters argue this is a completely responsible financial safeguard. The thinking is, since the president is legally liable, they must have the personal wealth to backstop the club, which protects it from reckless financial promises. But on the flip side, critics argue just as fiercely that this is an undemocratic moat. They point out that these rules, which were introduced while the current president was already in power, effectively turned the presidency into an exclusive billionaires club, making it practically impossible for any serious challenger to emerge.
And all of this leads us to a really crucial loophole, the walkover rule. Because the barriers to entry are just astronomically high, if only one valid candidacy manages to jump through all those hoops and submit their paperwork on time, the whole election is canceled. That single candidate is just proclaimed president by default, without a single vote ever being cast by those 100,000 socios.
Which brings us right into Section 3, the uncontested president. Because this isn't just a theoretical loophole. These rules have effectively cemented the power of one man over the modern era of the club.
Let's look at Florentino Perez's timeline here. He first took power in 2000, launching that famous Galacticos era, before stepping down in 2006. But then, he returned in 2009. Now notice what happens next. Those crucial statute reforms we just talked about passed in 2012. And after those rules were locked in, Perez faced absolutely zero opposition in 2013, 2017, and 2021. He ruled entirely through uncontested walkovers. The Socios literally did not vote a single time in those election cycles because nobody else could clear the hurdles. In fact, that 2021 election wrapped up in a mere 13 days from start to finish.
It's also super important to understand how the day-to-day power actually works here. Because while the 100,000 Socios theoretically vote for the president, the actual massive structural and financial decisions, like taking on over €1 billion in debt for a brand new stadium, those get filtered through a group called the Compromisarios. This is a tiny delegate body of about 2,000 elected members. So naturally, a lot of fans feel some friction over this, arguing that true direct democracy is kind of sidelined in favor of this small group of delegates.
Which brings us to the absolute crescendo of this explainer. Section 4, the 2026 Historic Showdown. Because my friends, for the first time in 2 decades, this impenetrable fortress is finally under attack. Today is June 7th, 2026, and today marks the very first contested election at Real Madrid in 20 years. After 2 consecutive trophyless seasons and a whole lot of accusations from the president about media destabilization, early elections were surprisingly called back on May 12th. And then, the impossible actually happened. Someone finally cleared that €150 million hurdle to challenge the throne.
We are witnessing an absolute heavyweight boxing match today. On one side, you have the 79-year-old incumbent, Florentino Perez. His whole platform? Continuity. He's already confirmed a deal to bring back Jose Mourinho as manager. He's touting the modernized stadium, and he's reportedly open to allowing private investors to take up to a 10% stake in the club just to stay competitive financially. On the other side, Enrique Riquelme, a 37-year-old renewable energy CEO. His platform promises massive generational change. He wants to target Jurgen Klopp as manager, he wants to bring back club legend Raúl as sporting director, revive the team's Spanish identity, and crucially, he vows to keep the club 100% member-owned forever. Zero external investors.
So right now today, between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m., over 70,000 members are expected to cast their secret ballots at the Valdebebas basketball pavilion. It is a massive, massive logistical event. And definitely keep an eye out because highly secure, notarized postal votes are being counted as well, and those could very well be the decisive swing factor tonight when the polls finally close. Section 5, the future of Real Madrid. Let's zoom out from the specific candidates for just a second to look at the macro stakes of this election. Because honestly, this is about so much more than who sits in the president's chair for the next 4 years.
The club is facing immense existential pressures on its traditional membership model. Florentino Perez has actively warned that remaining purely fan-owned is holding the club back financially, especially when they're going head-to-head in the transfer market against clubs basically owned by sovereign states. I mean, we're already seeing private equity, like the Apollo Fund, buying into rival clubs like Atletico Madrid. Meanwhile, you have younger generations of fans who are fiercely demanding lower barriers to entry, reforms to those highly restrictive 2012 statutes, and a real push toward direct digital democracy so that every single fan actually has a voice.
To really understand the gravity of today, you just have to listen to this chilling warning from the challenger, Enrique Riquelme. This election could be the last one before the ownership structure changes irreversibly. He is directly telling voters that the very soul, the core founding principle of this institution is on the ballot right now.
So I'm going to leave you with this to ponder as the votes are counted tonight. Is the era of the fan-owned super club coming to an end? Will today's historic vote be a revival of romantic football governance? Or is it its last gasp in the face of modern financial giants? Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer today. Keep your eyes glued to the news tonight because football history is literally being written as we speak.